talked a lot about the meta and the picks for each team's coming into it, so I just want to follow up on that and obviously take a look at the picks and bans. Vedius, you talked a lot about possible champion pool and meta adaptability for Power of Evil. However, they drafted a comp to which G2 reacted perfectly.
Yeah, we saw a pick composition come out from OG, which we have seen work in other regions. LCK have made it work really well, and the Varus with the Nidalee is something that can synergize if you set it up properly, and that's something that OG did struggle moving forward. But I really like the Soraka pick into this the poke comp as well, because they saw the Nidalee, they saw the Corki, and they said, okay, we can see what OG are trying to do. Let's get a bit of sustain to deal with this pressure.
Yeah, we're seeing two compositions here that neither really counters each other, but it all depends on who gets ahead. If you get control of the game as one of these poke comps with a beefy front line, then you can obviously whack away at the towers. What ended up happening was Origin falling behind early, and then the 1-3-1 split prevents them from grouping up, as the Fisher talked about plenty on the desk. Also, it makes it impossible to even get into those fights because everybody's kind of locked in their individual lanes. So if you have a composition that requires grouping and sieging of towers and you're never allowed to even group in the first place, then things get really rough. So Origin, they kind of need to look at the early game again and see where it went wrong.
Yeah, and we can take a look at where it went wrong or started to go wrong. Our first replay is of Perks, who chose to go with Fizz. They tried to ban out all the assassins, but he's like, hey, I'm going to play the fish. And then this skirmish happened.
Yeah, so you can see that Trick ends up getting caught out of position, but look how many resources actually get invested just to get the kill. Power of Evil burning both his flash and his exhaust just to get the kill down onto Trick. And remember that the strong side of the map is the bottom half for G2. Their bottom lane can quickly rotate up, as well as having the mid laner there to get the collapse. Fizz getting that first kill was absolutely massive for G2.
Yeah, it definitely was a little ill-advised pick-off, where you could have made a case for just getting the kill and then getting the hell out of dodge. The problem for me is that they kept fighting afterwards. I can see why they could go for the pick despite being on the wrong side of the map, but it's then they got locked into what they call like the soul queue mentality. I guess we'll just keep fighting with no thought. And then obviously everybody's collapsing here, so we see lack of communication on the side of Origin here. So yeah, they're reacting instinctively, but the communication isn't there. If you look at G2, I think there's a lot of communication there, but we see some internal struggle fighting the let's kill everybody style that Perks is used to playing, and then the more controlled shot calling from Mitty. So they'll need to find a balance internally there as well.
They certainly do. And it's funny that you mentioned communication issues, because moving forward, they did definitely have a couple communication issues where they actually looked for another fight towards the mid game, and that was not really what they wanted to do with their poke composition. If you're trying to force a fight against a Fizz who's already 2-0 up, it's not going to work out in your favor.
Yeah, they kind of overextend here. They land some poke, but obviously this is the weakness of some of these comps. It's flanks. If you have your flanks exposed, you're not warding them properly, then obviously what these 1-3-1 comps can just tear you apart from the sides. If Origin at that point is in the lead or has a bigger command of the game, they have more wards, they can take it slower. They don't need to rush into these decisions because there's no pressure from G2 kind of locking them down. That is kind of the difference.
On the other side, not rushing into decisions, we saw that G2 did take a little bit of a time to close things out in this one. What did you make of that? Just taking it calm, cool, and collected, or did you see improvement or things that they should improve on?
Well, I mean, they were constantly applying pressure onto OG, and OG, they still had a fair amount of wave clear, so it wasn't super easy for G2 to just walk up and take the towers for free, but they were constantly extending the vision line, and their main play was to pick up that the Baron. You saw them have full control over the Drake. They didn't give a single one away. Unfortunately, all three were the Cloud Drake for them, so they could run really fast, but it wasn't that valuable. But so much control of the Baron helped them move forward.
Yeah, off the back of the early game, G2 was bleeding them dry. I think we can criticize their execution on Baron. More pink wards were needed from multiple members. Synergy between pushing all the lanes up and then sweeping all the wards was necessary, because there was always that like strangling ward that was put in the river, slowed everything down. Execution was lacking, but the concept, the idea was right. I think G2, if they look at this replay, they can easily identify where they need to improve in execution. But the concept was right. Obviously, it is very easy when your Fizz is like 4-0 at 11 minutes.
Yeah, definitely. And that also made us give our first player of the game here in the arena to Perks on Fizz. Not a big surprise in that game. I mean, the whole team definitely stepped up, but it's one of those marquee performances where you pick that champion and you know you have to perform on it, and he snowballs the game.
I really like the Fizz pick as well. You saw how many assassin bans were thrown at him during Champion Select. The Zed, the LeBlanc saying, no, we're not going to give you a comfort pick. Then he brings out the Fizz as well. Really complements his playstyle of I want to go for kills, I want to be that carry, and it's nice to see that Perks can still have that phenomenal performance from the mid lane.
Yes, and in game 2, we will also see the Perks versus Power of Evil matchup. No changes in there for OG, and obviously the best of 2. We'll see how the teams adjust to that, because it's also the first time. So OG could just turn up and show us a completely different comp. We'll see that in just a bit. However, before we take a break here, we're going to check in on the series that's underway over in the LCS studio and on the other stream between H2K and Roccat. Crepo, you've been keeping an eye on that surprising result.
Yeah. The analyst desk right now is a central hub, so spoilers, be aware. Jankos went in here for an early engage in the early game, but he kind of got turned around by ROC. So this put Roccat ahead. Right now you're thinking Rocket's going to take it. The advantage got thrown. The next key moment in the game was actually a fight that broke out in the mid here, where H2K is pulling ahead. They kind of sieged down 2 turrets and they were leading. Earlier than this, Roccat actually snuck a Baron to get the game even again. So the game swung a couple of times. That is the main key thing you have to take away from this game. H2K looked in a very commanding position. Beautiful team fight here as well, where they kind of back off all together. So they seem very much so in unison, while Roccat was kind of chaos. But out of that chaos eventually came one pick about the minute before this phase right here. That led to a double siege from Roccat. Then they got the ace and they closed out the game. Very confusing. Basically, the game swung back and forth quite a few times. Neither team played perfect. It did look like H2K was the better team. They took control of the map, but they left their guard exposed a couple times, and Roccat has zero hesitation kind of going in for the kill.
That was super impressive to me, to be honest, with their changes in their roster. Of course, the Korean players in there and what they pull off in the end is a difficult team composition, but they thrived in the team fights in the end, which is something to commend.
Raze actually has a bit of a reputation of being that just go support. He loves to force the engagements, and being put on that thresh, I think it really set him up for success. Constantly looking for those picks and making plays really fits his play style.
Yeah, a lot of the early aggression kind of stemmed from Betsy as well, doing some really strong trading on that Swain pick. Eventually moved in side lanes, had a lot of attention towards him. Where Roccat failed is when they couldn't capitalize on kind of the cross-map plays. So H2K went to kill Betsy. Roccat didn't get anything done. Eventually, they managed to put Betsy to great use in these fights, and he really carried the momentum.
Yeah, Betsy also player of the game in that first H2K vs Roccat game. If you want to catch the second game over there, that's just gotten underway over on EU LCS 2. But here on the LCS Arena, G2 have started the series with a win, but Origin has a chance to fire back in just a few minutes. Stay tuned. Game 2 is coming your way in 3.5.